Today we're doing a set of brushes on a golf cart motor. And I'm part way through this, but I'll show you how I got to this point. I'm using a Drive 2 Yamaha because of the opening is so wide you can see everything in there. But to get to that point, it is literally just remove one screw there, and that whole compartment comes out. On the previous model, this guy, which is a G29 or a Drive 1, and also the G22s, they've only got this small compartment, so it's just a clip there, and that section removes. It's a little harder to get out, but the job is the same. You don't need to remove this bottom tray. First thing to do would be remove the main positive terminal, because you're working out the back with power. So once that tray's out, you have a speed sensor on the end of the motor. That is, just push that little clip in there and pull that plug apart. You have 4 wires up the top. They are all labeled. If you see A1, F1, and you'll see there, if they're not labeled, before you remove them, just put tape on them and just mark them 1, 2, 3, 4, and then mark these accordingly. And then once the wiring's out of the way, there's 3 bolts. There'll be one there, and one down the back, and then that whole motor lifts off. It is quite heavy. On the earlier models, you'll probably have to go out underneath with the cart jacked up. With these guys, like I said, the reason I'm using a Drive 2 is I can get it out this way so you can see. But I'm warning you, they are damn heavy and can be very awkward. To pull the motor down, remove the speed sensor. It'll be quite tight, but you can just pry it off. And you need to remove that sensor because those 2 Phillips head screws hold a retainer which will hold the armature in, but I'll show you that in a second. These screws, the bolts, go right through the motor. They're about yay long. So remove those guys. Now, I'd almost call this a serviceable item. Maybe 5 years doesn't seem enough, 10 years seems too long. So let's say about 7, and ideally this car is 2017, so it's right about time of filming. That is 7 years old, so we'll see how much. You'll actually be surprised how much carbon build-up there is. You can already see it. Look on the bolt, carbon build-up. Look at that one. So there's going to be plenty of carbon inside this motor, and that's what's slowing it up. The symptoms I've seen from this problem is everything from jerkiness, shuddering, not running at all, running intermittently, and all of those symptoms are from that carbon dust blocking up the contact between the armature and the brush pushing on the armature. Well, there you go. Have a look in there. That's all carbon dust. Look how thick it is there. That's off the brushes. So the brushes might be okay. With a good blowout, they might be okay. And because we've undone, oh, look at that. Look at the dust coming out of that. You can see the dust coming out of it. So we'll undo these 2 Phillips. And again, you can see all the dust in there. That armature, believe it or not, is actually really good. The main problem you find is they'll be sticky. All that dust will block these guys up and they won't be sliding freely. They're all quite good. That armature is really quite good, but I'll give that a light sand. I expected this armature to be a lot worse, and if it was, you would get a little block and some, I don't know, 800-ish grade sandpaper. Start with that. I'm just going to give this a quick polish with some 1500. I might even insert into the video an armature that's really bad from a previous video, and then you can see if you do have to go a little bit harder on that, but this one is surprisingly good. I'm going to polish this armature up with some really fine sandpaper. If it's too badly done, too badly scored or burnt, you actually have to go and get that machine, but this one will come up all right with some fine sandpaper. Right, we'll get stuck into that. When you're sanding down the armature, don't go too coarse. Start with some dry, maybe 240. You don't want to rip into it too hard, because once those ribs are gone, the armature's buggered. Start with a 240 and finish with something like an 800, but you can go as fine as you want. You just want that nice and polished. Just about there. I'm actually going to go a bit finer. I'm going to go 2000 on this one to really clean up. It's come up pretty good. So that polished up all right. I haven't quite taken those two ribs there and there out, but it doesn't really matter. The brushes will ride on that surface in the middle. And then we're just going to blow out the casing, maybe spray it down with contact cleaner or something like that. Just make sure the brushes are traveling freely. Obviously don't breathe this crap in. Look at that. So polish that up a bit, and I said inserted the bad armature, so if you've got to go a little bit harder. And as far as replacing the brushes from this point, it is just get a small screwdriver and flip those springs like that. Just flip the spring, instead of being behind that brush, it's now beside the brush, and you can just push them out. Undoing this guy, 1-2 nuts, that guy pulls out, and you'll see the cable runs around to the other side. Do the same on that side, and those two brushes will come out. To do a full set is literally undo those nuts, and the brushes come in a pair. You see a short cable and then a long cable, and it'll be the same on this guy, a short cable, and right around the other side is a long cable, so they're opposing each other. Once you've got to that, that's actually how you put the armature back in as well. So you set all the brushes out with the springs like that, set the armature in. So again, flick your spring back, bring your spring to the top of the bracket there, so that all your brushes are out, and make sure they all slide freely. That's actually what slows the cart down. This one, as I said, it was very slow to react to the throttle. It would have been the brushes not sliding freely with all that carbon dust inside there. It blocks them up and they won't slide. So that's ready to go back in, but they can be a bit tricky going in, because you see there's that backing plate, there's two little screw holes. You've got to line them up with those two holes, but if you just slide it on that way, that pushes back and your screws don't reach it. So you've actually got to set it facing downwards on a crate or something, and I'll show you that. So if you see your two holes there, you've got to line it up with that plate. So the easiest way, and the reason I sit it on a crate, is because this bearing, or this head of the speed sensor, has to actually go through. So if you just sit it on a flat surface, it's not going to be able to protrude out the end. So you need to sit it over a recess, so to speak. Say like that. Then line up your backing plate. Drop him in. Okay, so once you've lined your holes up, sit him to the side, grab a little screwdriver and get on the back of that backing plate, and you'll hear it push up against. You can see grab it again. You can hear it push up against the back of that housing. Pop him in. Once you've grabbed him with one, the other one will be lined up. In with your second one. Nip them up. You can see there how we set the brush out and the spring on top. Now you're literally holding your brush in and flicking your spring, and that's now holding that the brush back onto your armature. So pushing your brush in, flicking your spring over like that. And that retainer is probably the hardest bit about putting it back together, because it does want to try and get away from you. That's your brushes back on your armature. Once you're back to that point, you'll see on the top of the cast there's a mark there. There'll be the same on the case. Mark there, and that's how they go back together. Just like that. Now that's sitting apart because I've got the end of the armature on the bench, but that will allow you to drop those in, rotate them around till you find your thread. There and there. Speed sensor back on, but there is a gasket that goes on that guy. And your speed sensor will always point between the terminals like that. A lot of the times when you pull these motors apart, the brushes will be worn down quite far. Obviously in that case they need replacing, and like I was saying, it is only undo the bolts on top of those terminals and removing them, replacing them. Little bit of preventative maintenance before you go back in. In the end of that shaft there's what's called an input shaft bumper. It's a little rubber. Do pull him out and inspect him. Again, that one's pretty good, but I've seen them worn right down to about half that width. If they are worn down, a 5-cent piece here in Australia fits straight in there. Then pop that guy back in, or pre-order these guys. They're about $1. I'm going to put a little dab of grease on him and pop him back in. If your input shaft bumper is failing, you'll know, because the shaft will rattle. When you back off the throttle, you'll hear that clunking as you back off the throttle. So one in there, one in the top, and one around the back. There he is. Don't forget your little... Oh, that's the wrong one. Why I say it's the wrong one, that one doesn't have a washer. Those two have a washer. That one's clearly using that bracket as a washer. G29, G22 and drive 2, guys. Don't fall into that pitfall. There's a hole there, there's nothing threaded in the motor. I don't know why that one's there. It's on all of the models. I'll nip those guys up. Nipping the top one up to take the load off the input shaft. So it's just straightening the motor up. And then your side one's next. So like I just say, following your wiring after that, that says A2. So A2's there, F1 there, and on the other side will be F2 and A1. Spring washer, nut. And as long as you label them as you're taking them off, you won't have an issue with which way they came off or went on. Out of curiosity, if you got a cart that didn't have anything labelled, so we've got F1 is green, F2 is black, and they're the closest to the left hand side. A2 is black, A1 is white, and obviously they're at the other end of the motor. If that helps anyone that's got a basket case they're trying to fix. I guess varying carts will be varying, but all the Yamahas will be exactly the same. As I said, this could probably be classed as a service item. You see that build up in there. That one we got before it got too bad. I've seen these so bad that the cart literally won't run, but you'll get a rubber mallet and tap the engine or the motor, electric motor, and away it'll go, because it's dislodging the dust from the brushes contact again, and away it'll go. That doesn't mean it's fixed, it means that's exactly what's wrong with it. You've got to pull it apart, clean it out the way we've just done. Done. Back in with the cover and away you go. And don't forget, replace your main terminal. And away you go.